Hey guys, I'm Kerr Martian, back with Train Simulator. But instead of our regularly scheduled live stream, this time I'd like to show you how to reskin rolling stock in Train Simulator 2017. It's not as hard as you might think. So first you're going to have to download a bunch of software. You'll need RS Bin Tool. This lets you edit special file types that Train Simulator 2017 uses for textures. You can get it from the Railworks America forum. The link to that will be in the description of this video. You'll also need to download and install 7-zip from 7-zip.org. This is going to allow you to open .ap files pretty easily, which are otherwise .zip files. You don't have to use 7-zip. You could rename your files, but with 7-zip, you can easily right-click on .ap files and choose Open with 7-zip. So I recommend that. It's also a great tool to have in general. And you'll also need GIMP, the GNU Image Manipulation Program. GIMP has a plugin that can open .dds files, which is another game image file type that we'll be converting our Train Simulator files from. So go ahead and download RS Bin Tool by clicking on the download button here. Read through the license agreement. It says basically don't use this to steal content. You can download the file, open up the resulting zip file, and now you'll have a folder that includes the executable and some supporting files. So you'll want to take this, copy it, go to your program files folder, and paste it there. You can see I already have done so. I've pasted RS Bin Tools here. So now in my program files, I have the RS Bin Tool. And for our use, since we're going to use it anyway, let's quick pop it open real quick. And Windows should give us a little warning. In your case, it probably did. In my case, it doesn't because I have already opened it up in the past and gone past that warning. So let's close out of that for now. And I'll leave this in the background so we can use it when we need it. The next thing you'll need to do is download and install 7-zip, and finally download and install GIMP. Next, you'll need to download the GIMP DDS plugin. You can get it in the Google Code Archives. The link is right here and also in the description of this video. Make sure you get the right version of the plugin. I strongly recommend that you download the 64-bit version of GIMP and the 64-bit version of the Windows binary if you're using Windows, which you probably are. And if you download this, you'll get an exe inside a zip file and a readme. So you'll want to take this exe and you'll need to put it in the relevant GIMP directory. Now, this is probably correct for you, but if it's not, you should find it in a similar location. Go to your C drive, choose the place where GIMP is installed. So for me, that's Program Files and then GIMP. For you, it might be Program Files x86 GIMP if it was the 32-bit version that you installed. Then go to Lib, go to GIMP, go to 2.0, go to Plugins, and then here you'll paste the dds.exe executable. Make sure you do this with GIMP closed. The next time you open up GIMP, it'll have the ability to open DDS files, which is what we're going to need for our Train Simulator textures. Now we're ready to start actually creating our reskin. First, you'll need to find your Steam Apps folder. For you, that may be under your C drive. For example, C:/program files x86, Steam Apps. For me, I have my Steam Apps folder on a different drive. So I'm going to close out of the C version. Here, I can go to Common, then Railworks, and then I have the base directory for Train Simulator 2017. Before we can start creating the reskin itself, we're going to have to unpack some of its files. And in order to do so, we'll have to use the serz.exe tool within Train Simulator. I've selected the 4 files that you'll need in the Railworks folder. They're serz.exe, stlport_vc10.5.2.dll, zlib1.dll, and zlibwappy.dll. I've done this by holding down Control and clicking on each of these 4 things. Now, I can right-click and I can choose Copy. We're going to make a temporary folder where we can put all of the working files that we deal with during our reskin. I'm going to do this by creating a new folder inside my Reskins folder. I'm going to call it, in my case, HST CPRR. I'm making a Central Park Railroad reskin of the Class 43 HST. So I can now go back over here, copy those, and paste them here. I could also just drag them over if I wanted. Now we're going to need to open up a command window to run the serz.exe program. Go up to the folder above your reskin folder, shift and right click on that folder that you just created, in my case HST CPRR, and click on Open Command Window here. And you'll get a command window in this folder. if I type dir, which means show the contents of the directory, you'll see those files I just copied in. sirs, stlport, zlib1, and zlibwappy. I'm going to put that in the background for now because we'll get back to it. Going back to your Railworks folder, and remember what this path is, you'll need it later. We'll go to the assets folder and then figure out where the folder for the content that you want to reskin is. It depends based on whatever particular package you're reskinning. In my case, I'm looking for the class 43, and specifically, I'm going to find the class 43 that was packaged with the Bristol to Cardiff line. So if I go into DTG, and then I find Bristol to Cardiff, I'll find two files in here. The blueprints.pack file is kind of a cache folder that allows Train Simulator 2017 to more quickly load the content in this content pack. The file that I really care about is the .ap file. Now, as I said a little bit earlier, a .ap file is basically just a zip file. I can open it by right-clicking on it and choosing 7-zip Open Archive. And it's going to open, I'm just going to drag this over to the correct window, in 7-zip. You can see that there's a lot of different content in here. Some packs will have just the locomotive by itself. This happens to have a whole bunch of other things, like characters, weather, lighting, environmental things, buildings, and so much more. So what we're actually going to need within this is the rail vehicles. This is a diesel vehicle, and you'll see that we have the HST as well as the Class 70 and Class 175 inside this folder. We're just going to care about the HST, which is of course a GWR livery in the Bristol to Cardiff pack. So before I get too far ahead of myself, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this whole folder and I'm going to copy it. So I've already done that. I've right-clicked on this, I've chosen copy, and then I've done paste. And I'm going to do this again so you can see what it's like. I'll rename my old folder, and I will do this again. So if I right-click on this, choose copy, paste, and then I will rename my copy. Now this is going to take a little while because it's a huge file. As I said, it contains all of the information essentially for the Bristol to Cardiff pack, from the way that the tracks are laid out to where the buildings are placed to what the buildings look like to the images that are used on the terrain to all of the vehicles, the people, and all the little incidental objects in the world. Once we've copied out this folder, we'll want to delete all of that extra stuff from our copy of this folder because we're not trying to make a whole new duplicate of the Bristol to Cardiff line. We're trying to make a modified duplicate of just the Class 43 HST. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to rename this. I'll call this HST CPRR. Now I'm going to go into this folder and I'm going to rename this. So I'm not going to rename this file. For simplicity, I'm just going to leave this as Bristol to Cardiff assets, and this is not going to change any particular thing. This is not going to cause us problems. I will, however, open this archive with 7-zip, and now I can start deleting some stuff. So inside the audio folder, we have a few things. We're going to want to delete everything except rail vehicles in my case. And it's going to ask us to confirm. We confirm. Make sure that you copied the folder before you do this. Otherwise, you might accidentally be deleting some of the things from your actual Train Simulator 2017 files. You can always fix this by going to Steam and choosing Repair Files. On the other hand, you also want to make sure that you actually copy this out, because if you don't, if you just modify the existing vehicle in place, the next time that Steam does try to either update or repair those files, it'll just write over your reskin, and that's not what you want either. So as soon as this finishes deleting these files, we can go back to the folder above it. So we have just our rail vehicle sounds in here now. And I have some duplicate stuff. I have the freight sounds, but we'll just leave that in there for now. I'm also going to want to delete other things. So scenery, we don't need. Rail vehicles we need. We don't need environment, rail network, weather, lights, stations, template routes, system, characters, route markers, particles, preload editor, time of day, input mappers, and then those are the only ones we want to delete. We'll leave the rest of these files, the .lan files and the .sbin and .sbin.md5 files. Hit delete once more, wait for it to delete these additional files, and we're done. So now we have kind of a minimum framework to work with. Inside our rail vehicles folder, inside the diesel folder, let's also get rid of the Class 175 and Class 70 folders. Just, again, to reduce to a minimum working set what we're going to need. Inside the HST GWR folders, you'll find a bunch of subfolders, and these contain different pieces of the model. So the cab view is the model that is basically put around you when you're riding inside the cab. It might be interesting to learn that you don't actually have the whole train loaded behind you when you're in the cab view. In the Class 43 folder, you'll find kind of the exterior information. This is what we're going to be modifying today because we want to repaint the outside of this locomotive. We'll also see that we have other folders like lights, passenger view, that's the model that you see when you're sitting in a passenger seat, actual models of the passengers. These are folders containing the coaches, as is this one, and then information about how to simulate the train and what the bogies look like. The first thing that we're going to want to do is modify the .bin file that contains an XML text file, including information about what exactly makes this locomotive work. It's all of the textures that go onto the geometry of the locomotive, the sound files it uses, how different pieces fit together, like how you put bogies, bumpers, and couplers on it, and much more. So we're going to want to use that temporary folder that we had put together for our sirs.exe program. So in my case, I had that in my Reskins folder. Inside the HST CPRR folder, I will drag the class 43 gwr.bin file. I didn't take the ND file. That usually stands for no driver in train simulator lingo. So I'm in just my HST CPRR temporary folder that I'm using to store the contents of my reskin as I work on it. Now, go back to the command window that you opened before, or if you closed the one that you opened before, then go back to your folder above this one, shift right click on the folder that this is, and choose open command window here. Now we're going to use the sirs file. So sirs.exe, I typed ser and then I hit tab. Tab will automatically complete things for you. And you also now want to add class 43 gwr.bin after it in my case, or whatever your .bin file is for your particular locomotive. And if you have questions about what that is, I'd be happy to assist you in the comments. So when I press enter, it'll say conversion complete. So it's taken that .bin file, and if you look at the folder right here, it's converted that into a .xml file. sirs.exe goes in both directions. If we were to then give it the XML file instead, it would convert it back into a bin file. Now there's one more important thing that you should do while we're still here. Right click on your .bin file, choose properties, and make sure read only is not checked. If read only is checked, uncheck read only, click apply for safety, and then click OK. If it's read only, you won't be able to modify that binary file after we make changes to the XML. So you'll want to edit this .xml file. You could use Notepad. I prefer Notepad++. So for Notepad++, I can just take this XML file and drag it in. And I'm going to full screen this so you can see the whole thing. As I mentioned, this contains all the different pieces that put our locomotive together. So there's a bunch of different things that we can kind of mass change. The first thing that I want to replace is BC class 43 GWR. Everywhere where this appears, I'd like to replace it with just class 43 CPRR. So I'm going to type in class 43 CPRR. I got to this through Control F. There's the find window, and then I went to the replace tab. I'm going to replace every instance of BC class 43 GWR with class 43 CPRR. I'm going to replace all. And two occurrences were replaced, just these two here. Now, the next thing we're going to want to find is everywhere where it says DTG Bristol to Cardiff rail vehicles. Remember, we have changed that folder. We created our own folder called, in our case, HST CPRR, and if we don't modify this, Train Simulator isn't going to be able to find all the little components that make up our package. So, if we again replace DTG Bristol Cardiff with, in this case, DTG HST CPRR, which is what I named the folder once I copied that giant 1.71 gigabyte folder, I can click replace all. And in this case, a whole 37 occurrences were replaced. And there's several other things that we want to similarly replace. So in product, where it says Bristol to Cardiff, I'll take this. And although it's not vitally important, everywhere where I see that, I'm going to replace that with HST CPRR, replace all. And that was 26 occurrences. I'll leave it as DTG is the provider, that's fine. Rail vehicles, everything that starts something like rail vehicles is fine because we didn't change that. We're not going to modify the physics at all. We're not going to modify the bogies. We are not going to notably modify the name of the folder inside our zip file from GWR to CPRR, just again to try to change as few things as possible so we break as few things as possible. The very first time that I did this process, it took, I want to say somewhere like 16 hours until I had my first successful repaint. So let's try to break minimal things. And then if we just keep scanning through this, we'll see that most of the things we need to change have indeed successfully been changed. And we'll be able to tell if we missed anything because when we go to actually test our engine, we'll find that it does not run properly. So with these changes in place, I will save this file. In my case, that's just Control S, and I'm going to close Notepad++. And now we're going to do that process that I talked about of converting this back into a binary file. So back in our sirs.exe folder, or well, our HST-CPRR folder, the one that has sirs.exe in it, I'll type in sirs. I'll do class 43, but this time I'm going to press tab a second time because I want to convert the XML file. So if I convert that, now it says conversion complete. And if we look closely, now the .bin file has an equal modification time to the .xml file. So that's good. That means that we've successfully written a new copy of our binary file. If you get some kind of error, then double check that you changed that file to no longer be read-only. Now we're going to want to dump this file back into our zip file, the one that the .ap file that we opened with 7-zip. So if we go back to 7-zip, for me that's just pressing Alt-Tab. You can just change windows the way you prefer to change windows. I'm going to drag this bin file back into here, and it's going to ask if we want to replace it. We'll say yes, and you see that now this file has a modification time of today, October 28th, 2017. So now we want to do some actual repainting. All of this has just been preparatory work before we can start modifying some textures. So oddly enough, we want to go into the textures folder. So in the textures folder, we have a lot of different things. Some of these are pretty obvious. Primary numbers 0 through 9, I think you can guess what those are. Things that say something like headlight and taillight, I think you can guess what those are. The ones that we're going to want to modify are the ones that are up here in my case. So HST PW, that's probably for power car, 1, GWR dot, and then TGPCDX is this proprietary file format that we're going to be converting using the RSBin tool that we downloaded at the very beginning of this video. So just like with the bin file, I'm going to drag this out so we can actually edit it. Drag it into there. There it is. So now we have this TGPCDX file. Why Train Simulator 2017 had to use a file format that nobody else understands is a great question. I have no idea what the answer is. In my case, I left RSBin tool open from before. If you need to go find it, remember to go look in your C:\program files or C:\program files x86 folder for your RSBin tool folder. Now, the first time you open it, it'll ask you where your Railworks folder is. And if you forgot, then go back to the part of the video where I show you where to find that. In my case, it was on a separate drive called J. In your case, it might be in the C:\/ folder. Once you're actually in RSBin tool, you'll want to open this texture we just pulled out. So we don't want to be in this particular folder right now. We want to be in our temporary directory where we put our little reskin. So in my case, that's in Documents, Reskins, HST-CPRR, and here's our TGPCDX file. I'll open it up, and here we go. So now we're really getting somewhere. You can see the classic forest green of the Great Western Railway livery, and you can see, confusingly enough, that this has been taken apart kind of into what's called a texture atlas. So it seemed like maybe I was doing the hard part already. No, this is the hard part. The hard part is figuring out what different pieces of the skin actually correspond to different pieces of geometry in the locomotive. I did a live stream a few days ago where I spent about 2 hours reskinning the HST, reminding myself of some of the skills necessary for this video, and I had a number of my loyal viewers tagging along with me, and they were exclaiming about how it's so hard to do reskins in Train Simulator 2017 that they were just thinking about using the wrong trains in the wrong places to avoid this process. But I know that you loyal viewer, do not get intimidated by something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert this TGPCDX file into a DDS file. A DDS file is much more well understood by a bunch of different editors. It's a special kind of texture used in video games that has multiple levels of detail or bitmaps embedded in it. This file right here is 1024 by 1024 pixels, but it also encodes a bunch of other versions, like a smaller 512 by 512 pixel that's half as large, a 256 by 256 pixel version that's a quarter as large, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this little DDS tool menu, and we're going to choose Export DDS Data. And I'm going to put this in my Reskins folder, in the HST-CPRR folder. I'll try to name it the same thing as the original file for now. So that was HST-PW1 GWR, and in this case, I don't have to type the DDS, but I will. Data successfully exported. So the next thing we need to do is go to GIMP. You must install the DDS plugin into GIMP before you open GIMP. If you haven't done so, go back to that part of the video and install the plugin. Now, I already have GIMP open here, and I actually have the reskin of the CPRR1 in it. This is my streamlined private train car / locomotive that I've used in a bunch of my videos. Feel free to go look back at those if you're curious. But it's a reskin of the 801, the Hitachi Class 801. So we're going to open, and we'll find that reskin folder, HST CPRR, and there's our DDS folder. You can see that because we installed this plugin, that GIMP now understands what a DDS file is. Now, if we open this up, there's a menu that appears on a different screen. I'll pull it over. We do not want to load the bitmaps. We just want to load the highest resolution version. We do want to automatically decode YCOKIG/AX images, and we do want to show this dialog in the future. And now we have our original skin. This is a little bit different than what we saw in the RS bin tool because GIMP doesn't quite understand exactly what that transparency, that alpha layer is supposed to mean. If you look in channels, you'll see we have red, green, blue, and alpha. And in parts of this, it's correct. Like the windows in the front are empty, as we expect them to be. But this isn't quite what we want. So what we're going to do, unfortunately, to make life easier for ourselves, is first decompose this into these 4 channels. So we'll go to Color, Component, Decompose. And again, I'm going to pull this window over. We want to convert it to RGBA, decompose to layers. And now we have, if we go back to layers, 4 different layers, red, green, blue, and alpha. Now, we can take just the red, green, and blue parts so we can more easily modify this. If we go to colors once again, components, and then compose, once again, pull this over, we're going to compose this with just RGB, and we're going to use the red layer as red, the green layer as green, and the blue layer as blue. Click OK. Now we have something that looks familiar that we can work with. We have the left side of the locomotive, the right side of the locomotive, the front, the back side, which is going to be mirrored in one place. We have the top of the locomotive up here. We have the back here. We have all these random pieces that come together to make the full locomotive. From here, I'm going to have to leave you to your own devices. What I recommend doing is making some minimal modifications here, including drawing on top of this to make some marks that'll tell you where exactly each piece is, like make little weird symbols with pixels in different colors. Then load this model into Train Simulator using the process that I'll show you in the rest of the video. Test out what you see and then repeat. So if you, by the way, don't know how to use GIMP, I strongly recommend you look up how to best use it. Things like creating layers and learning how to use its tools to paint, draw, fill, work with selections, work with paths are all very important. And at some point, I'd love to actually publish part of my live stream where I was working with this original model and modifying it up to the Reskin CPRR HST that I'm going to show you in a moment. So without further ado, let me flick my magic wand and show you a painted up version of this HST. So here we have a much more colorful HST. This is maroon on the bottom, black on the top with a gold stripe in between. And I even have a little tiny version of the CPRR on the nose of this locomotive. Now, unfortunately, the GWR HST has the GWR logo imprinted in geometry on the side, so this isn't going to quite work the way we want it to. You'll see how that looks in-game, but we're not going to worry about that for now. That's going to be future work. So, before we can recompose this back into the kind of image we need to pass back through all of our steps to get it into Train Simulator, we're going to have to temporarily flatten all these layers that I've created here. So, if you go to Image, you have to choose Flatten Image, and remember to undo this after the next step so that you don't lose all of that information you had with your layers. By the way, notice that I've done that thing I talked about. I put all these stripes of color on the side because I want to align this gold stripe that's on the side of the left of the locomotive with where it should properly be on the back part of the locomotive. I'll show you what that means in a moment. Now, we're going to go to colors. We're going to decompose this once again. We're going to decompose it into just the RGB components. Make sure you get that right. You're going to get an image with 3 layers, red, green, and blue. And it should look basically like a grayscale version of what you just left. Here's the blue, here's the green, here's the red. In my case, there's lots of red, so the red channel happens to have a lot of white or light gray in it. Remember to go back to your original. I'm going to press Ctrl-Z for undo, and that'll unflatten all my layers. That's important. I also recommend that you save a GIMP format version of your file, so that's an XCF in this case, so you can keep working on your reskin over time. It's probably going to be something that takes you much more than a single sitting to complete. Now, go back here once again, and we're going to have to add that alpha channel back in. So click on this little button down here, create new layer, create a new layer filled with transparency, and then move that to the bottom. And I'm going to rename this, just for clarity, to alpha. Now, go back to your original decomposed image. That was this one right here. And remember, this had red, green, blue, and alpha. This is the one that we decomposed from the original DDS. Click on the alpha layer. Click on the rectangular selection tool, or type R. Then click inside here and do Control A for select everything. Control Copy to copy. And you've copied the alpha layer. Go back to the image you just decomposed. Click Paste. And then click anywhere outside. You'll see that the alpha layer is now filled in with the alpha texture that you need. Now, once more, we can recompose this. So, Colors, Components, Compose. And now we put our alpha channel back in, so we can do RGBA for our composing now. And here we go. Here we have something very similar to what we saw at the beginning. It has our new colors, but it also has this weird set of transparencies that don't super make sense. Now, we're going to have to save this as a DDS file again. So go to File, then Export, go to the relevant folder, and we're going to save it as something similar to the DDS we started with, but I don't want to overwrite it. I'm going to just call this Reskinned. I'm going to add Reskin to the end of the file name just to keep things separate. And it's going to ask me a few things. This is probably the least obvious part of the process and the one that made life hardest for me when I first started. First, go to Compression and choose None. Then, under Format, go to ABGR8. Then, and this is going to be unintuitive, go back to Compression and choose BC3DX5. This is going to gray out the format box, but I found that if you don't select ABGR8 in this grayed out format box, that this won't work properly. Make sure you choose Generate Mipmaps. You won't have to change anything in the Mipmap section. Default is fine, default is fine. And then click OK. You'll have your DDS. I'm going to minimize GIMP. We'll go back to DDS tool. And now we'll go to DDS tool, import DDS file. And get your reskinned DDS file. Open it up. Successfully imported. Now, here we have exactly what we expect to see. We have our red, gold, black, gray, and multicolor HST CPRR1 skin. Now, we can save this. And when we save it, we're going to save it back as an TGPCDX. So, click Save, and it might yell at us. If we go to File Save, you'll see that it definitely does yell at us. This file may be read-only. Well, guess what? This file is read-only. So, go back to your folder, the one where you're keeping all your temporary files for reskinning. Right-click on your TGPCDX file, and just like with the bin file, uncheck read-only, click Apply, and click OK. Go back to RS bin tool. I always do this both times, do both of these steps every time. Click on the save icon, go to File Save. Now we have our modified TGPCDX. If we pop open 7-zip once more, I've just left this in the background, you can do so too. We can now drag this updated TGPCDX in here and confirm that we want to replace it. If we double check, just to be sure, we'll see that the timestamp on this is in fact October 28th, 2017, whereas the rest of the stuff is from November 2016. Now there's one more thing that we have to do before we can open Train Simulator and see the results of our efforts. We will go back to that folder where now we have to do just one more thing before we can pop open Train Simulator. Go back to the folder in the Railworks folder where we had the .ap file for this. Find the blueprints.pack file and delete it. In most cases, you should do this every time. I've recently discovered that it's not strictly necessary. If you encounter any problems, you should go back and delete this pack file. Now we can open Train Simulator. So I'm just going to go to Steam and do that. Back in a moment. Each time you modify one of your reskins, you'll want to go to Settings, Tools, and then Clear Cache. This is not technically necessary, as with the deleting the blueprints file, but again, if you encounter problems when you try to load your reskins, especially if you load it in and discover that your screen is full of flashing, glitchy geometry, click on Clear Cache, and it should resolve it. Now we'll just wait for Train Simulator to reopen. Now, we'll double check that our train successfully loaded and give it a try. So go to Drive, go to Quick Drive, click on the train, choose Custom, and then let's create new, confirm. Now it's going to load up all of our existing DLC, including our new Reskin, which counts as its own piece of DLC. Let's fast forward past this. Let's find our locomotive. So if we choose Diesel under Type, we will see Class 43 CPRR. And now comes the moment of truth. There we go. All right. So there's our Class 43 CPRR. It's been repainted. You can see it still has that GWR logo on it, as I warned you it would. Interestingly, when you do reskins, it tends to put the characters on the roof, whether they're the driver or the passengers, but that's usually okay. You'll also see that I've put these colored stripes in here so I can try to see, once I have this in the game, which one lines up with my actual gold stripe. And I will show you exactly how we can preview that in the game. Now, let's just make a little train for ourselves. Add to front, and then I will put another one on the back, flip this one around, and then let's put some little coaches in between. There we go. Not a prototypical train by any means, but we've put in some cars, and we have our special CPRR HSTs at either end of our train. So we can go to next. We can save this as tutorial HST CPRR. Save, and then we will choose that under our custom train, tutorial HST CPRR. Might as well run this on South Wales Coastal. Let's run it from Bristol Parkway to Cardiff Central. That seems reasonable. Let's set a good time of day. I have this at 5 p.m. on a clear autumn day. And let's start. And once again, let's do a little fast forwarding to get past the Train Simulator 2017 loading screen, especially this tempting little sail here. And here we are. It has loaded. Well, it looks like an HST to me. Let's look outside. Ta-da! All right, so there's our HST in more or less all of its maroon glory. There I am sitting in the window, and you can see things like, for example, it appears that somewhere between this blue and cyan is the correct place to put our gold stripe. It lines up specifically with the top of this grill here, so probably the topmost pixel of this middle dark blue line is the bottommost pixel of my gold stripe. Sounds like that Freightliner is powering up. Sorry for all the noise. We have our GWR logo still here. We'll deal with that later. We have black on the top, gold stripe along the side, maroon all over the place. And this looks very nice indeed. So, there you have it. How to reskin trains in Train Simulator. By the way, I also put some markings on here to try to figure out where the headlight extra yellow pieces were. You'll see that I'm going to have to fill that out with maroon shortly. So let's just give ourselves a little joyride in this and go to the next station. We might as well. If you were just here for the tutorial, feel free to jump out now. Or you could join us. And let's get going. Yeah! Here we go. Actually, let's put our camera elsewhere. Let's put it right here. I think full power is in order, don't you? Yes! Let's get some speed! We have crossed into a 60 zone, so all is well. And I think we need some headlights. Yes! That is what we like. Look at this train right here. Have you ever seen a better looking train? I haven't. Ooh, meeting another HST too. I think a screenshot may be in order. What do you think? I think it may indeed. There we go. Very nice. Very nice. Our wrong lights are on though. Those are tail lights. Those are not headlights. We won't worry about that. We'll just take an excellent screenshot right here. And continue. Now we have the correct headlights. Notice that among other things, I've tried to put a small logo here. We're speeding, that's alright. We want to go fast. Actually, let's see if we can stop at this station. Despite the HST's well-documented inability to stop quickly. Now we can lay off the brakes a little bit. I was saying that I tried to put the CPRR logo right here, and it's decent. It's decent. It's too small to be very detailed because, after all, that image that we're using for the texture is only 1024 by 1024 pixels. So let's get a little bit more braking going. We'll have to overhang the logo here slightly. That should do it. And doors. And here we are. Our Reskin CPRR HST on the Bristol to Cardiff line. So I hope this has been an informative tutorial. It's been pleasant having you all with me. I tried to keep this a little bit shorter than my standard Train Simulator 2017 videos. I hope it was brief enough to give you everything you needed to know without leaving anything out. Of course, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. You know I love answering questions and fielding comments. If you have any suggestions for other tutorials that you would like me to create, please do let me know. And I look forward to seeing you, as always, in the next video.